Hello, everyone. This is Leilani Cawthon, CEO and publisher at the Learning Council News, Media, and Research Organization, and also proud EduJedi Leadership Society Grandmaster. A lot of people that are joining us today are also EduJedi, and if you're not an EduJedi, we'll tell you how to join when we get to the end of this webinar. We have featured in our discussion today Dr. Joseph Baeta, who's Superintendent of Schools at Norton Public Schools, Massachusetts, Dr. Gearl Loden, who's Superintendent from Nixa Public Schools in Missouri, and Dr. Thomas Langdon, Superintendent of Walkerville Public, Michigan. Joseph, you want to say hello?
Good afternoon from Massachusetts.
Yeah, good to have you. Gearl.
Good afternoon. I'm excited to be here today and to learn from everyone that's presenting.
Great. All right. And then Dr. Thomas Langdon.
Yes, good morning, afternoon here in Michigan. Great to be here and to discuss this important issue.
Great. So I want to just let everyone know that as we get into this conversation, we're going to have a bit of a word from our sponsor, Venkat, Varada, who's from Tynker, one of our favorites. And then I'll give everyone a short briefing on where the CARES Act is at right now and what we're thinking about it from, historical lessons learned from the stimulus the last time we had a stimulus in America, and then represent the key questions for our panelists and open Q&A. Proceeding forward with this event today, so the questions to the panelists today are going to be, when we come back around to them, what is your district's circumstances? They're different. It's a patchwork quilt nationwide as to who has money already allocated or what they're looking at with budgets. What are your expectations of the CARES Act and other lines of federal funding, because there's some open grants you might want to go after? What transitions are you making or your intentions for the future, particularly as we round into fall? And is any ed tech in the mix that's workforce development focused? Because we realize now from all the Learning Council research that that's going to be a huge priority to get students workforce development in their communities and in their schools going into the fall and probably for quite a while. So I want to introduce to you Venkat Varada. They're a great company. We've worked with them in the past. Venkat's been on the road with us in our live events. So we're excited to have him here today. And I'm going to turn it over to him to give you a little brief message about what Tynker is doing today. Go ahead, Venkat.
Thank you, Leilani. Thank you again for having us here. And hello, everyone. It's an interesting time we live in. The depth of learning around the words like remote, distance, long distance learning, I mean, you name it, all new words, hybrid learning, everything is coming to life like we have never seen. There's not one person on this call who has not chartered into new territories, whether it's administrator level to all the way to the teacher and everybody in between. So whether you all end up in a full remote mode or full classroom mode or a hybrid environment, however that's going to work out this coming school year, one thing we know that tech is playing even more important role, and the more we can do in terms of mobilizing that focused effort into that, so that you can truly bring those future-ready skills to your community is becoming even more important. We awarded some grants for the last 3 months during the COVID time, and we did a study based on that. There are some amazing results coming out. I will share that somewhere through the presentation. My goal here is to give you a little overview of Tynker. The idea here is how to maximize your funds, however form they're coming to you, how to maximize your funds with Tynker, not just as tech for the sake of tech, as I said, but to help truly focus on helping your students be future ready, so you can have the maximum value for the least amount of dollars spent. So I don't know how many of you know about Tynker, but we are basically an 8-year-old company, and we built our company on 3 pillars. Our number one goal was providing fun and engaging content, not only because engagement is a huge thing. So fun and engaging content to kids, so that not only is just through structured learning, but also an interest-based learning, so it can facilitate both of that. To that extent, we took a curriculum focus early on when it was not even popular. So our goal was to give enough content in there that caters to the interests of the students, so that there's personalization there, and at the same time, give enough content and take the heavy lifting off of the teachers. So today, and I'll go through that in a second here, but so take the heavy lifting off the teachers, so they're truly facilitators. It's not one more thing to learn. Let's them focus on teaching and what they're teaching in the classroom. And the third pillar through that is a way to measure all this. is not just give the content, but the biggest challenge with this environment today is, especially in the coding and STEM and computer science, is there's a lot of ad hoc stuff going on. So the idea here is, can we measure what they're learning? Can we give tools to the teacher? They're truly facilitators, whether they know coding or not, and then give proper class management assessment tools through that, so that it's not just time spent, whether it's money spent or time spent, it's measured, and then the outcomes can be made improvements upon. So that's kind of the high level, 3-level pillars. We brought that into that. I'm happy to report, one of my mentors said that if it's true, it ain't bragging. So I'm going to brag a little bit here. We are the only company out there, if you look into the computer science, CS, STEM, coding and all that, we are the only company that actually takes schools and districts through this continuum, through this progression, by giving a scaffolded curriculum that spans over 650 hours worth of it, and introducing right concepts at the right place. So today, this brokenness within the tech in itself has so many tools, and so within science and math, there are so many tools. We said, let's see if we can avoid that in computer science, coding, and STEM. So the idea was, can we take the students through this K-12 continuum and introduce concepts at the right time and actually measure what they're learning? So the challenge with that is it's a lot of silos. There's something else for coding, there's something for CS, there's something for robotics, there's something for hardware, there's something for STEM. Our goal was, how do we unify this into a platform so that there is no cost duplications, and measure in such a way so that you can quantify every step of the way, so that you can focus on personalized learning outcomes, and also to the level of concept mastery, which is unique to us. In the world we live in today, teachers are overwhelmed with technology. So our goal is, when it comes to computer science, coding, and STEM, how do we help LMS systems become less cluttery, for heaven's sake, and cumbersome, by having so many tools, so many platforms. So though we give coding and CS curriculum, which is our kind of a DNA of our company, one of the things we take pride in, probably the only organization out there, profit or non-profit, our goal is whether the student chooses computer science or not, is to integrate coding, because I'll be preaching to the choir here if I say the benefits of coding from a critical thinking and all the other aspects you all know well. Our goal was, whether the student ever chooses computer science or not, how can we bless them with coding mastery, or the intelligence, or the things that coding provides, through integration into subjects. So we have over 250 lesson plans that any teacher, whether they know coding or not, to integrate into day-to-day subjects. What it allows you to do is, it allows you to bring the ROI in also. You can integrate when you're looking to spend these funds, how much technology in one platform, and it can integrate into one classroom without having too many learning curves and too many platforms. So that is one of our biggest goals that was there. So this kind of a little snapshot of what we have. I'll send all this to you through Leilani, but just pick a grade at the pre-K level to the K-12 level. How can we serve this community and provide that continuity that kids can get and students and teachers can enjoy through the process? So I'll leave it at that, and I know Leilani probably has some questions for me later, but I want to keep to my time.
Yeah, that was a great overview. Obviously, there's a lot more to know of people not familiar with coding, what it does for logical thinking. So really grateful to you. Also very aware that American parents are hunting down any sort of coding on the open markets right now. One of the things that's not known is that the consumer markets took off as soon as quarantine started, and tons of parents were out there shopping the app markets, the open internet, and buying digital learning anythings in record levels. We've never seen the type of buying that they were doing. So that's really something that schools need to be aware of, because professional grade software is really what parents have been exposed to now, and they're kind of expecting it from schools. So I want to give you this brief overview and then wrap our panelists in. So, you know, the US K-12 market spends about $715 billion total annually. On EdTech, that's about $36.2 billion. Out of that, it's only about 5%. We're expecting that, as the year-end numbers come, to have jumped to close to 8% or higher. The ERA stimulus, the one that we had back in 2009, was $100 billion. It seems like it's a lot higher than the 30 something billion that came into education. in this CARES Act, but there's a big difference between the two things. Only about 900 million out of that 100 billion actually went to EdTech. 70% of it went to capital outlays such as construction and land purchase, equipment acquisition. And for every 1 million in grants to any one district, you know, this is sort of patchwork across the nation how it was spent, but it actually increased employment. It didn't just protect employment, it increased it to 1.5 people relative to the non-stimulus baseline. So that was a surprise, and it's not very well known. The CARES Act is 13.2 billion just for K-12, another 3 billion in governor's discretionary funds, which may, some of it may land a little bit in higher ed, and then another 300 million in the Rethink K-12 model and Reimagining Workforce grants. So this, I'm not going to go through all of these slides, but you'll see in your operations panel, there's a handout, so you can download that PDF or view it at any time and go through all this data in detail. This gives you a little bit of detail on that extra 180 million Rethink K-12 education model grant, and 127 million for Reimagining Workforce, which is that Reimagining Workforce Preparations Act is a fund. This is why we asked Tynker to sponsor, that could definitely be applied for to put in coding programs of any kind. And then there's some other sort of interesting points to that. So in terms of eligibility, the funds for the money coming in the CARES Act are supposed to commit to employment to the greatest extent practicable. But I want you to notice the word practicable, because there's a lot of teachers retiring. There's a lot of teachers who are saying, I'm not coming back, I'm afraid. I'm in my 60s and I don't want to. So that's happening. We already had a teacher shortage. So sometimes what schools are doing now is they're trying to lean much harder on technology to carry more of the load, because they're not going to be able to have the number of quality teachers. So you can fully document and explain the reasons why you didn't just retain employment, you went a different route and purchased other things in order to change the structure of your delivery and execution model of teaching and learning. So what the CARES Act are for, again, I'm not going to go through all of this, really providing resources, heavy emphasis on online learning, remote learning, school sanitation and cleaning. It's a very different set of wording than the last stimulus act. So our take on it is, at Learning Council researchers, we think that there's going to be way more spend in the technology arena, in the billions, in comparison to less than $1 billion the last time around. So the emphasis is added is that facilitate remote student learning and to purchase technologies such as internet connected devices. That's very definitely a part of this particular act. So what the data said about the last stimulus, and I mentioned this already, is it more than protected jobs. It increased jobs by 50%. And then you can see from the highlighted part, that's straight off the US Department of Education's Reinvestment Act, you know, post-mortem look at what really happened with the money. The other thing that happened is there was some big and sometimes incongruous construction projects, and there was money left over for years. The feds had to ask states to please spend the rest of the money. But some of what was being done with new buildings was a little bit weird. You know, 579 million for a school with only 4,200 students. It takes many years to justify that as that level of spend. Both of those instances were in California. I can say that, I'm a Californian. So the other thing that happened is schools hit a funding cliff. So if they try to just save jobs and they actually increase numbers of total jobs, then later on, when the money ran out, they hit funding cliffs and they couldn't sustain those jobs and then had to do layoffs. So it got pretty ugly over time. But right now, the 2020 to the 21 budget cuts, we're already seeing reports that there's quite a few places in America, here's 2 of them, that are reporting no cuts, despite the fact that it seems like it's all bad news out there and it's just a cataclysm of unprecedented proportion. It's not. So we want to make sure that we highlight some of that. There are places that are reporting cuts. Wisconsin's getting severely hit. Other places are getting hit, but they're expecting some of the stimulus money to lower the trough of their lost revenues. So there's also really sharp differences. Arizona had a significant increase in total spend for their budget going into the new year. California, of course, huge hit. But when we did the math on it and we looked at the allocation after Governor Newsom made this announcement, of what they would be getting in California for money from the federal government, it turns out that they're only going to be shy about $7 billion. And after the CARES Act, so that was going to be 10% drop in revenue for every district. After the CARES Act money fills in, it will be less than 5% of every district having to take a cut. New York is another story. Their budget cuts are pretty severe, but again, we think the stimulus is going to even out that trough. So when we looked at the nation, the 20 to 21 appropriations before the CARES Act, which means the legislative appropriation to the states in terms of what would happen in the July 1 new fiscals, the gray states are reporting statewide cuts. Those were all trying to report statewide cuts. The unknown states are in that green color. The yellow are stable or actually up, like Arizona. Texas is very stable. And then we put on the slide some of the highlighted points where individual cities in the news have reported either their budget is stable, they have interim budgets only, meaning they're waiting to find out what the CARES Act is doing, or they're reporting actual increases. So those are interesting points to see, because some of those increased budget areas are some of the wealthiest in the nation, and they may be inside states that are reporting statewide cuts. And that has to do a lot with the local budgets, because as you can see at the bottom of the slide, the typical funding for education is state and local. It's not federal. The federal percentage is going to be higher in this year with the CARES Act money coming in, but it's typically already 8%. Okay, so coming back to our panelists, going back over these questions again, and I'm unmuting all of you. What are your district circumstances? You can sort of answer these one at a time if you would like to, and we can come back to them. And then what are your expectations? What are you doing with transitions? And then particularly, what are you doing with workforce development? So I want to call first on Dr. Joseph Baeta. Go ahead, share with us what's happening for you, and then what you also think about what's happening with the CARES Act.
Sure. So one of the things in Massachusetts that's really interesting is that our CARES Act has been kind of broken up in two different ways. The direct funding via grant in my district is $187,000, which is based on Title I, where we're not a very high Title I district in terms of free and reduced students and all of that. And then there's the second part of the money, which is actually going through the municipal side, of which there's an expectation that schools receive money, and that's $1.75 million. So basically what we're doing is we're looking at these two pieces of the pie a little differently. One very much around future planning. So we right now are going to get about $700,000 just for infrastructure technology upgrades that we want to make in terms of some of the software that we utilize, going more of a pre-K to 12 instead of just 6 to 12 or any of those types of situations. Then the second funding source is being pretty much going to be utilized for playing catch up around our special education and ELL populations. And the reason for that is here in Massachusetts, we're still waiting for our Department of Elementary and Secondary Education to give us guidance. It's supposed to happen as early as tomorrow, no later than next week, on what the fall is going to look like. And so we've been told to open up for our ESY programming in the summertime. That's caused a lot of conflict and a lot of pushback. And so when we're looking at these funds, the biggest issue about the funding right now for us is that we're not saving jobs with these funds at all. I just unemployed people Monday, and we have districts in Massachusetts that are laying off as many as 100 to 300 teachers, not including support staff. And part of that is just that this funding doesn't seem like it's going to support, at least the way Massachusetts is looking at it, keeping jobs. Now, there's a lot of pushback at the state level to allow for that to actually be funds that can go back to the general fund of a community and then from there distributed in order to keep people unemployed. So that's an area that's still to be determined. So for districts like me, we're a 1-to-1 district in grades 3 to 12 already prior to this. So the issue of equity became a significant, simply because my K-1-2 students, actually my pre-K-1-2 students, didn't have the technology. So part of our request with the funding is to make sure that we have 1-to-1 pre-K to 12 so that we fill in that hole that we really have an equity issue with.
That's a good overview. I think, Dr. Baeta, I'm going to move on and have the other two superintendents respond the same way and then come back to the other questions too. Dr. Gearl Loden, go ahead.
So yes, in Missouri, our governor has already issued two rounds of cuts for our state. And Nixa, we have a $70 million budget. We have about 6,450 children. And we've been cut $1 million and been told to prepare for at least $2 million in additional cuts for the next school year. We're receiving approximately $650,000 from the CARES Act. So we're using our reserves and the CARES funds to continue with the fundamentals that we have in place already. We're a one-to-one district and we have some computers that we need to life cycle. We were able to partner with local providers to make sure that our children had internet connectivity in the spring. And we, with almost 6,500 kiddos, we only had to build about 80 packets per week for our children. So we want to make sure that we build off of that success and even have less children that need paper packets if we do have to go virtual again. And then we're using Khan Academy plus building our own virtual lessons, trying to be very proactive with our PD. A big portion of our PD this year will be focused on RTI, knowing that our teachers are really good at working with children that arrive that are behind, but we'll have more gaps this summer or this fall than normal.
Yeah, you know, your day, Gearl, was the only one that I went really in depth on in terms of the research that we did. And what's funny is that you're saying there's going to be cuts, but your governor had said in the news that they were going to cut 191 million statewide, but then the CARES Act has a plus 71 million over that 191 if you add the two acts together.
I will give him credit. He has been proactive in meeting with the districts and going over the budget. The budget shortfall for the state now is at 1.2 billion.
Wow.
And he has been using all of his discretionary funds and all to plug the gaps. And we're blessed here. We don't have large reserves, but we have enough reserves that we're able to hire all of our people back for the next year. We've already issued contracts, and we know that the next year will be very lean.
Yeah. Well, what I'm hoping for you is that there's more money coming in than maybe was expected that's coming into education, and then that starts to flood down and does a full recovery for you. So hopefully you get to invest in some more stuff. That's what I'm hoping.
Yes, indeed. And we have some great partnerships. We have great tools and resources, especially being one-to-one already for several years. And with the online learners we had great success this spring. And we already have children back for summer school, seated summer school, which is kind of unique too, but we're excited about having kiddos back on campus with our teachers.
Oh, yeah. And they're excited to be together. All right.
Oh, yeah.
Dr. Thomas Langdon, let's hear from you.
Sure. Well, you know, as often, Michigan seems to have some unusual circumstances. And in this case, it's no exception. So we are looking at CARES Act money. Well, first of all, it's important to note that we are not allowed to, right now at schools, lay off employees. And so that puts us in a different position. Of course, that's good that we don't have to lay off the employees, and it's good for them, but we cannot, especially at the beginning, cannot use them at full service because of all the restrictions. So we are doing that, and because of that, and this is not something that's been announced, but I think it's pretty much understood that you know, we are using the money for a lot of that and other costs. So our money will be used a lot as far as the employability piece, because the unemployment piece wasn't there for us. That we're looking at next year. We're looking at a possible proration this year, but we are thinking that probably the clock is ticked on that. But we're looking at next year. If you look at all the budget people, the House fiscal and the Senate fiscal, the people that have come out and talked about this, anywhere from a $600 to $700 per student cut next year. But as these gentlemen have said, you know, you look at the CARES Act, it's a smaller school. I'm going back to this school that worked with them as superintendent. I started my career there 20 years ago and then went off to other larger schools. But this is just a small school. But the CARES Act brings about $90,000 for Walkerville. And a lot of that, some of that money already we're spending on Chromebooks and some other technology boost for some laptops for teachers to help them. But even before this event occurred, we were one-to-one from K through 12. The real issue, and the thing that's going to be a real problem for us, is that the connectivity is very poor in our community, school community. In fact, the last census that the numbers came, census was 2010, but it predicted up to 2018 that we'd be at about 57%. We could actually do the live streaming and work through, classroom connections in that way. So there's a lot of issues, there's a lot of pieces to the puzzle that we're dealing with right now, but as suggested earlier, we're using some of the techniques out there that other schools are in some of the programming like Khan Academy. That's a huge piece for us. One of the big issues is continuing to do the professional development for our teachers to be able to get them more attuned to Khan Academy and other softwares like that, and how to use them when kids have to be at home. Because we're fully looking at next year as there's going to, even if we start face-to-face, which we're very hopeful we will, there's going to be what I call COVID days or COVID weeks even, where students will have to be learning from home again. A lot of that learning this year was through packets, paper packets that were delivered or picked up by the students.
Wow, okay. So you guys, Dr. Loden, Dr. Langdon, you guys have been in the packet world. This is changing nationwide that sometimes if you have connectivity issues for kids, you got to be dual channel like that. But most districts are already at the point of talking about a permanent shift to even altered schedules, days in, days off, grade trade outs, the elementaries and Monday, Wednesday, and Tuesday, Thursday. The middle school, high schools are mostly remote. So it's just a very different world. And then running on both channels gets really hard. So I want to come back around to some of these other questions. I might flash them up on the screen for you guys and come back around to each of you. Let's go into detail a little bit more about the transitions you're making. What are you shopping? What's happening in terms of the structural shift? Because, there's guidance like you were just talking about, days off, maybe weeks off for COVID again. And then what's the pressure? I'll come back to that question in another round, but let's talk about those transitions in terms of your structure and what you're thinking of so far, what your state is telling you. So Dr. Baeta, you first.
So it's been a little difficult in Massachusetts because, we're 351 individual communities with only a few regional school systems. Most of us belong to a single community. Well over 65% of the communities in Massachusetts are under 2,500 students. So we have a lot of local control issues, and we're also a dynamic, very union-heavy state. So there's a lot of collaboration that needs to take place. For example, during this whole COVID shutdown, we have a labor management committee consisting of myself, board members, and then union leadership on how to come to agreement on, changing of schedules and all of that. So what we've done is we've broken ourselves up into trying to prepare in a way for a staggered opening, a remote 2.0 at another level, if you will, learning, and then more of a hybrid online. And so the hybrid online is really has us looking at some of the partners that we have for example, credit enhancement or credit recovery, and how do we utilize them to be more of a 6 to 12 partner than just a 9 to 12 partner? What's the best online resources if in fact we have a 50% of the students in the classroom on an alternating week, alternating day, AM or PM schedule? What are the students going to be responsible for doing when they're at home? That's beyond anything to do with packets, but actually kind of a Blackboard model where students have online material that looks a lot like a Khan Academy in mathematics, but is more of a pick and choose, if you will, within our district by staff and or by curriculum leaders. And then the last part is making sure what Tom suggested. We have really high connectivity in my district and throughout most of Massachusetts, although there are parts of the state where 50% is definitely barely there. In my area, 98% of my families have online connectivity, and they may have some glitches here and there, but and most of the glitches is because everybody's home. Dad's home, mom's home, or the parents are home, and everybody's connected to the same Wi-Fi, and maybe they never thought that they need 5 people connected at the same time for 8 hours a day. So that's been some of the things we've had to work through. We only have 10 families that we actually had to, working with our local Comcast, we were able to actually hook them up with Wi-Fi, and we got donations to support them so that the students could have connectivity at home. But the biggest issue that I see in this whole story is making sure that we don't give up our non-negotiables, those things that are inherently part of our culture in Norton that we don't want to give up. At the same time, also providing for the change that I think is an opportunity, actually. I think a lot of us think of it negatively. I think this is an opportunity to bring public education into the 21st century. It is 2020, going on 2021, and we're still talking about connectivity with families and one-to-one. And then lastly, what are the alternatives from families? And I put that out there as part of our structure because I am getting emails from families saying, I want to stay in Norton, but I'm not sending my children to school until there is a vaccine. Or I'm not sending my children to school if they have to wear masks. And so if I want to keep students enrolled and families active, I'm probably going to have alternatives for those families, i.e. they're online at home, not remote, but online. And what is the software and the partner that we're working with to provide that, and how do we do it?
Yeah, so you're living the world of now the disaggregation of the services functions in the schools. So rather than being sort of the manufacturing model in school, move from class to class, grade to grade, you're having to think through how you're going to disaggregate services. That's a trend that's been happening for a while. And I would mention that, Lammersville ISD did this in California, where they actually pulled in a tremendous number of seats from the homeschoolers by changing their schedule so that you didn't have to be there all the time. And they have open office hours in the middle of the day with every teacher. They swap out different lunch hours, and then they have like sort of an open thing. So the homeschoolers can come in and meet if they need help, but it's not all class structured anymore. There's a lot of individual paths that are going on. That's a high school. You can't necessarily do that with the kindergartners, right? But there's definitely a lot of that disaggregated service model thinking. So I'm glad you're doing that. And you're going to have to, right? Like you said, you're not going to get the seats back unless you do. So that's really great. Okay, Gearl Loden, let's hear from you on the same subject.
We have been analyzing the guidance that we've received from our state and at the federal level. We've also been looking at some of the countries that either never stopped having school or have started back, trying to learn from them. And we have alternate methods of instruction documents that we prepared for summer school and for the fall. We have 1,900 of our 6,500 almost students that are in seated summer school currently. And we're receiving some great feedback from our parents and our teachers as far as things that we can do to be more prepared for the fall. And after summer school, we will revise our documents that we have and keep looking at the research. So we'll have a good game plan for August here. We're prepared already to start with a traditional model that's modified with new safety protocols and procedures. We also have the ability to start virtually or to flip the switch if we have an outbreak at any time during the year. We need to go 2 to 3, 4 weeks to a virtual model. So that's kind of our core foundation of things that we're doing and looking at. The connectivity is an issue. I'm proud to say that we only did about 80 packets for children that didn't have connectivity or either had IEPs that required packets. But I would like to know that we have universal connectivity in the fall if needed. And we have some rural outline areas that is a real challenge to have. And then the PD side of things, we have Canvas and have used Canvas as our learning management system for a good while. This reinforced maybe with some of our teachers that we're not using it as well or holding out on using it, the need for Canvas. So we'll have more PD with Canvas, the flip top model, and we'll also have our teachers working on the virtual types of lessons that we can archive for our children and our parents. And that's some of the things that we're doing. Now, one thing that we're not doing that has been referenced is we're using lots of survey data, trying to gather information from our teachers, parents, and children. And A/B types of days here, our community is really against. They're like Dr. Loden, we prefer to either go virtual together or be in school together. And with the teachers and with small children, it's kind of hard to teach. If you're in the classroom and your kindergartner is not in school today, you've got to find childcare. So we're staying away from that. But we're excited about what we have in place. And we know that there's still lots of things to learn between now and school starting back up.
Yeah, I would suggest you also take a look at those last couple of grants that were on that earlier slide, and we'll make sure you have all these slides, Dr. Loden, because one of them allows you to provide micro grants directly to families from that federal pot so that they can get access by hook or by crook. So that's a new thing. We've never seen that before from the feds. So you might want to make sure you have a full survey of who's missing access, because that could be huge. All right, Dr. Thomas Langdon, let's hear from you.
Yeah, I think the key that we're looking at for next year is the being nimble is going to be incredibly important. And from the very beginning, there's going to be some, although we've done some informal surveying, we're going to do some more formal surveying. And we see that 90 to 95%, even higher, that parents out there want their kids back in school, and they see what they've missed in the last 3 months. So there definitely, the will is there to do that, especially for my region, again, a little more rural. And so I don't know if they see the definite threat as much as some people from more of the larger metropolitan areas do. But to be nimble, because you're going to have to use that technology in the future. Again, if there's brief gaps in when you can actually have students in school, or even degrees of what they can or cannot do while they're in school. So to have all of that range of being able to change on the fly is going to be very important. But at the end of the day, it's all about doing good things. And as Tynker representative mentioned, you have to look forward on this. We should have been looking forward on this, and I know that many of us were, but now we're really compelled right now to look at what we can do for students and allow them to get the technology they need. Because you look at formative and summative assessments, and we know formative is much more important. We know intuitively that the formative assessment can be much better gained as far as data through technology. And it's going to be an incredibly important thing that we need to use regardless of what goes on with future outbreaks or more waves coming back from the pandemic we're in right now. We need to have that to be able to substantiate progress with students. And that's going to be key no matter what.
Yeah, and I really love what you just said about bringing in that other kind of software, because one of the points I want to make is, Learning Council, we do a lot of research into the types of software that are out there. There's so many thousands. As you guys know, you probably hear from your teachers, there's just a bajillion potentialities of resources. And what's happening right now nationally is that schools are seeing that when they're remote, it's very hard to contextualize the same sort of school day with the same sort of schedule translated into that remote environment, because kids can't be on Zoom meetings all day every day. And so a lot of schools have been discovering they have to go over to this online version where the teachers are not the central force of teaching and learning the whole time. They're telling kids, go log in over here, go log in over there, do this over here. And then, they're not on Zoom meetings all day, every day. That was crazy. So the high value professional courseware, a little bit like what Venkat was talking about, the first fear is, it's replacing teachers. Well, no, because now the teacher's time is more used for human interface, which is so critical. And even in the physical environment now, it's starting to replace, in order to be able to translate quickly to, we're all off of campus again, there was an outbreak. So I've unmuted you, Venkat, because I know you have seen some of that as well, where schools are like, we got to do this in a digital way. What have you been seeing, Venkat, in terms of what schools are doing?
It's interesting you bring that up, because we actually, March, April, May, it kind of fortuitously happened that we decided to say, okay, let's bless the community out there. Because our platform was designed not only for in-class, but also to the remote environment. So we actually gave out grants at the beginning of March to help with the COVID for distance learning. And we expected some good response, but some not only the response, but the feedback. I know stats are sometimes we just gloss over, but I think the reiteration here is more of the blended learning or hybrid learning is going to happen. So can we switch between both seamlessly without eliminating the role of the teacher and without diluting anything for the student either too? So we can't forget that stats become stats otherwise. For example, within that 3 months, we had over 32,000 new teachers at 9,000 plus schools in 122 countries adopted our remote learning curriculum. And on the parent side, close to 200,000 parents registered their children on Tynker courses for outside the school, and 6 million new students were overall took advantage of it. And the best part about it is the amount of usage that was there. A lot of technology you adopt, but the usage. You all, as superintendents, teachers, and you all know this very well. Technology doesn't mean how good it is. It doesn't mean translate to adoption. So the adoption rate was so high, which was such a blessing to see, that it kind of opened some barriers for people who were not, whether it's teachers, students, or parents. Here's the interesting aspect. Students spend over 2 million hours on Tynker learning to code. This is in the span of 2.5 months. This is staggering. Over 11 million lessons were completed on Tynker. And there's survey around how our platform was. I'll send you this data for your own education and passing down, but it's fascinating. Obviously, it's Tynker data, but you could actually read through and see the bigger picture on it.
Thank you very much. Yeah, so I guess the message to the three superintendents is really, and maybe you can all speak to this. I want to get to a question too that we had that came in, but the world of moving to remote learning has had this sort of underpinning to it that wasn't expected by a lot of districts, and that is it also was translating itself into professional grade resources. And what I mean by that is not just the scanned in PDF or the scrap of an old textbook that's coffee stained. Somebody took a picture of a paragraph and uploaded it into some learning management system. It's truly digital, gamified, complete with formative assessment inside. And the consumer markets is what the Learning Council, what we've been seeing, an amazing number of seats, like millions and millions of seats. Some companies picking up unbelievable. So the American public's now been exposed to that, which is putting an additional burden on you guys as leaders to make sure that you have that level of quality in what you're using digitally. So that's not that you needed another burden, because you certainly have enough. So, there's what's going on. I want to ask Joanne Para to ask her question of the panel. Joanne, do you want to ask your question?
Absolutely. I'm from Medina Valley ISD. We are just shy of 5,900 students. This year we grew by 600. This is my first year as the instructional technology specialist within the district, and we're in the suburbs of San Antonio, Texas. I'm looking at, because it's a new position, it's a new concept of using instructional technology, I'm looking at resources that are free. And so I noticed all the gentlemen mentioned using Khan Academy. What else do you have in place?
I'm going to call on each one in turn, but let me make this one comment, Joanne. Your area of the country has a lot of money coming down. Make sure you get your share.
I've been battling that, and we are looking at retaining jobs. And so we know we have a large food program that serves our community. We have lots of employees that traditionally would be within the halls that will not be within the halls. And so right now that has been placed as a priority.
Okay. I got it. I'm going to make sure, Joanne, I connect you up with Carla Burkholder from Schertz-Cibolo Universal, as well as our friends over in San Antonio ISD, because they may have stuff done that they can share with you too that's already fit to the Texas standards. But go ahead, Dr. Baeta, do you have an answer to what you're doing with free stuff?
Yeah, so we're a Google district, so right off the bat, that's been a lot of, we've been doing a lot of creating material before COVID hit us. We'd been 1-to-1 in grades 3 to 12 for 4 years, and we were integrating K to 2. So because of that Google connection, we had a lot of Google specific training that we've been doing, PD that we've been doing with our staff for the last few years. But then we also have purchased for both credit recovery and credit enhancement. We work with Edgenuity. Academically, we work with VHS, where we've had we have a huge dual enrollment program, which has actually worked really well with the colleges because our students have been used to doing online learning because most of the classes are hybrid. And actually those cost us nothing. Those are paid for by the state. And then currently, part of, I think the dynamics of looking at the CARES Act is where are the areas where we have holes and how do we best utilize the CARES Act funding to fill in those holes or enhance the products that we already have. So we're currently looking, I won't use the names of the companies, but we're currently looking at a number of partners and have to make some decisions. I do think that there's a critical issue here, though, and that is in K-5, the online opportunities that we're seeing are not at the same level as the online opportunities in 6-12. And I think a lot of that has to do with the dynamics of teaching and learning that takes place in K-5. That's much different, I think, or is somewhat different from 6-12. You know, students in K-5 or pre-K-5 are very much in stations on a regular day, multiple stations and group meetings and all of that, and not necessarily behind some type of technology. And if they are, it's because of a quick, as Tom said, formative assessment, or it's because they're breaking out into enrichment groups or students who need further support. And so it's not the same thing in the 6-12 realm.
Yeah, Dr. Baeta, I would like to make sure we introduce you to some of the good stuff that's out there now, because if that's your impression, then you haven't seen the new stuff. There's a lot of it in K-5. Some of the K-5 is even way better than the 6-12. So we'll have to make sure we have we send you a little list of things and stuff. Okay,
Yeah.
Dr. Gearl.
I'm excited to receive your list of things. We have, like most people, your core foundation. We have the Chromebooks. We have the learning management system for the secondary. We have a Seesaw for elementaries. We use the G Suite. One thing that we've done is when all the resources started being provided for free, we've encouraged our teachers to try them and try the new things and tools. And now we're starting the vetting process as far as what do we want to keep? What's part of our core DNA that we can use for the future? And that's kind of how we've learned that we'd like to build our own lessons and a lesson library internally, so it'll be aligned to our standards. I will say for the young lady asking the question there, we do have one of the best, in my opinion, tech people, instructional technology facilitators. If you'll email me, I'll be glad to share her contact information with you. But we're open to looking at new ideas, new solutions. We do have a virtual partnership with neighboring districts where we're able to allow our students to take over 200 online classes at the secondary level with over 30 dual credits. So we can actually have people that do not want to attend in the fall to go through this program and still work on credits for the diploma. At the elementary level is where we have some gaps to still fill.
Great. Dr. Langdon.
Yeah, I guess, what Joe mentioned for his districts, I would almost pair it. Google Classroom, Edgenuity. We have also a Michigan Virtual University, which does cost money, but that's another credit class that students can take, especially in the high school. We use Myon, but that, of course, costs money as well. But I will give this out, and probably already known, but Facebook is a way to connect free. And we have several teachers that have used that, and it's been very successful to get students online and to, as a lecture tool, but also just as the teacher, my third grade teacher had some pollywogs that had hatched before, this event occurred. And then during this whole event kept on showing how much bigger they were getting and characteristics of those as they transmorphed into the adult frog. And so I thought that was very clever and a good use of this, and it brought the students in. I think that can't be overstated enough. This has to be not only invitational, but we have to have something that students want to go to and are excited about using. If we can do that, then we've got half of the problem taken care of, I think. But we know K-5 is more difficult to deal with online than the secondary schools or classes. We know that by studies, and we know that we have to be a little better at it. And so I'm intrigued by the information you're going to send us as well.
Yeah, and I agree it's harder to manage them. And I'm feeling for all the parents in the nation who have multiple kids at home, or even just maybe one 5-year-old, and they're trying to work from home, and the 5-year-old kid is supposed to get on some Zoom webinar. And it's funny, we had one superintendent out in Colorado, Beaver County, say that the first time they put the kindergartners back on a Zoom meeting together, they all just stood there on the Zoom meeting and cried because they were so happy to see each other. They don't get it. They're like, why are we apart? It's so hard on them. We're seeing emerging areas of discipline that have never been chartered before. These are uncharted territory. How do we do this? How do you even hope to manage K-5? The software in terms of please get this module done. In the consumer side, the professional grade stuff, so engaging that kids do want to do it, because for them it's like playing a game. It's just actually math bubbles. They have to click the right bubble and they get scores and other stuff like that. That's the emerging thing. But still, you do have, like you guys have been saying, a certain percentage of kids, they're not engaged, they're AWOL. And we've looked at the science behind this so far. We're looking at, the extrovert kids, they just don't think it's real unless they're physically together. The introvert kids, almost nationwide, are performing better. The ones that never raised their hands in actual class, never said a thing, teachers are reporting now they're more engaged because they're doing it digitally. It's their channel. They love it. So we're learning things we've never seen before. I would advise you all to just sort of keep notes, observe, think about ramifications, because this is going to get harder before it gets easier going into fall, as you all know. I'd like to make sure we do one more round of comments, and then we'll be ending off for this webinar. It's been delightful to have all of you. Dr. Joseph Baeta, any other comments?
No, I hope that I get to see what both Gerald and Thomas are doing in the future, and hopefully we can find a way to send each other an email and keep the conversation going about creative things that you folks are doing that I can just outright take from you instead of having to restart the wheel from scratch.
Yeah, for sure. Dr. Gearl.
Just like to thank Learning Council for allowing me to participate today, and any of the documents that I've referenced today, if any of the people listening would like them, they can email me. I'll be glad to share our AMI documents or either information that we have.
Great. Well, thank you for joining. Dr. Thomas Langdon.
I would definitely welcome both gentlemen here's input going in the future. You can always learn more together. And I guess the one thing I've said for years is, I don't mean this in a passing or a joking way, you need to really trick kids into learning. Kids are smart, and they're not going to, if they feel it's not viable for them, they're not going to participate. And I also know that everybody on this panel would feel the same way about this too. Don't look at your middling students or your students that have the most access. Look at the ones that are having the hardest time of this, and consider the platform in that angle, because every student deserves an education. And if we do that, then we're going to benefit all the students. And I'm not preaching this to the people here, probably not to the listeners either, but man, we have to remember that, I think.
I totally agree.
Awesome.
Like I said, we're in uncharted territory, and we have to be very alert right now. Okay, Venkat, final comments.
It's been a blessing to be part of this. It's all, everything that's being said is pretty much new. We're constantly looking at and saying, what can we learn to integrate that into the already great platform we have, and to build on our name and everything. So thank you for all the comments. Every little nugget was well worth it.
Great. Just as an advice to everyone on the call today, if you haven't joined the Edu Jedi Leadership Society, there's a ton of free professional development in there. It gives context as to the directionality of ed tech and schools in the national market. It even has an analytics module for how you learn to think about data analysis from the teacher on up. There's just a ton of data in there. Please join. It's free. You even get a plastic lightsaber, and it doesn't get any better than that. So I want to thank Dr. Joseph Baeta, Dr. Gearl Loden, Dr. Thomas Langdon. You guys are awesome. I'm proud of you. I'm proud of what you're doing for your students. And then everyone, please know we're going to have next week a social distancing tech webinar. We'll also have overcoming your public's reasons not to return, because we're watching the consumer polls right now. It's pretty threatening. And then we're having our back to school tactics discussions starting on the 18th. There's 8 more webinars before the end of our summer season of webinars. These were surveyed. We had over 18,000 people respond to the surveys to pick these topics. So we know they're spot on. It's just a matter of getting people to actually attend. But the post viewing of all of these webinars, once we finish editing, is just off the charts. It's a massive number of people. So I want to thank again all of our panelists. And I want to say that we're going to get this done. America's doing this, and we will survive this, and schools will do well, and it'll all be great. I feel that. So thank you guys all again, and goodbye for now.